So you're going to start a podcast, but do you know what type of format your podcast is going to be? Maybe you're like, uh-oh, whoa, I didn't even think about that, Jen. That's okay. Don't get overwhelmed. I'm going to help you in this video. This is the top 4 formats that you can choose from to start your podcast. Format number 1, the interview podcast. My favorite. This was my favorite because I'm a radio DJ at heart. I was one for quite a few years, and I loved interviewing bands. I got to interview rock bands, local celebrities, prominent figures. It was awesome. So I love having a conversation and being the interviewer. And of course, my 2 podcasts that I'm involved in right now are both interview podcasts. The one that I do with the Home Builders Association Vancouver, my co-host and I interview people in the construction industry. And I love that because I love seeing what makes people tick. I love learning their story. I want to know why this topic that we're talking about is important to them. So that is why I like the interview podcast. It does have some cons. So interviews are not easy. They take a long time to kind of get that feeling for. And it's also not easy to be a great interviewer. Like I said, it takes a long time to learn that craft. So it might not be the easiest one to start with. A lot of people think that you just kind of get some guests and you roll off a topic, but you really have to be the leader when you are the interviewer. Of course, you've got to do an introduction of your guest, and then you've got to be able to keep the conversation going. So it can be hard at times, but I also think this is a great podcast format to do. Also, one more thing about the interview process is you're going to have to find guests, and sometimes getting consistent guests on your topic is also a little bit difficult. Format number 2, the solo podcast. This is great if you are an expert in something and you want to share your expertise. Basically, what you get to do is teach us something. And the solo podcast is amazing because you can talk about a topic that you're passionate about and you want people to learn more about. The only problem with this one is you've got to be able to keep the conversation going all by yourself for 20 to 30 minutes. Yes, you could do a shorter podcast, maybe 15 minutes or even 10 minutes. There really is no limit to how long your podcast should be, but you want to make sure your conversation that you're having is engaging. You want people to be able to listen to just you talk. So you've got to make sure what you're talking about is something that's going to add value to people's life, and it's something that interests a lot of people. But again, in other videos, we can talk about what type of topics you could be talking about in your podcast so you can be successful at this art form. Format number 3, podcasting with a co-host. One of my favorites again, because in my background of radio, I used to fill in as the morning show co-host at one point, and I love having that extra person to banter with. So if you want to do a podcast with just you and a co-host, this is great because then you're not lining up guests, but then of course you do have the option to line up guests too. So you can kind of marry it with the first format, which we talked about is the interview format. So you can have a co-host and it can just be you doing a topic, or you can have special guests from time to time as well. The options are endless with this one, especially if you have a co-host that you guys share this like passion for a certain topic. It can be super engaging and can give 2 different opinions of the topics you talk about. And it can give you 2 different opinions of the topics you talk about. I think this is a great idea, especially if you're starting out. I have a lot of friends that have started podcasts with their friends on certain topics, either it be motherhood, fatherhood, and it's a topic that they like to talk about and they're able to relate to a wide audience. So again, I think this is great way to start, especially if you're new to podcasting. If you have somebody that you'd like to talk with all the time, you have a great rapport with, great chemistry, I think this is a great option for you. Format number 4, the theater podcast. I love theater. My background is also in theater before broadcasting, and I love theater podcasts because these are a great way to involve a group of friends. And if you are great storytellers, why not bring it to the podcast format? So back in the day, there used to be radio plays. So this is kind of just another level to this. It's kind of similar, but you're doing it on a podcast. So if you're a great storyteller and you want another medium to share your story, this is a great idea. So you might want to think about getting your theater troupe and doing a podcast, especially right now with COVID. Podcasting is very great way to be distanced from each other because you can all be remote setup, which of course I'll go through in another video, and you can be doing the podcast remotely and not in the same room. So you could really create a great story. All you need is a script and a few ideas. So there we go. Those are my 4 formats that you could be doing for your podcast. Of course, a lot of them have different challenges and some of them require extra equipment, but we will go over all that again. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but in future videos, I plan on doing many, many videos. It might take me a bit, but I do release one every week and I want to cover all topics because in the end, I want to help you create a great podcast and I want to make this easy for you. So some podcasts formats that we discussed today are going to require more equipment. And like I said, we're going to go over that in another video because these are the things you got to think about is what space am I going to do this? Is my podcast going to be remote? We haven't even touched on remote podcasts yet, which again, we will. So there's just so many questions that I will help you answer. But those are the 4 formats you can choose from to create your podcast. You got to start somewhere. So you might want to choose one of those formats and get going. Of course, there's many other different styles out there as well, but I just wanted to cover 4 in this video. Before you go, please do the things for me that I need you to do. Subscribe to the button below, hit the bell for notifications, and I just appreciate you watching these so much. So bye for now.